Hi, I'm Aarti, and this is The Group of Seven and Tom Thomson by David Silcox. It's a book of Canadian landscapes by artists who redefined the genre in the early half of the 1900s. This was gifted to me by my eldest Canadian cousin when she visited us a few years ago. It's especially meaningful because I had visited the McMichael Collection in Kleinburg, Ontario back in 2007, where I was first introduced to the work of these painters as well as native Canadian art. Over the years, I've come to regard this book as inspiration not only for landscapes and representation of nature in its many seasons, but also for color, form, and technique. The images are beautifully reproduced and large enough to make out the details where needed. In this video, I'll show you my most favorite paintings in the book, which I return to and observe often. The ones that I learned from, as well as those I just plain like looking at. Alongside, I'll give you a potted history of the Group of Seven and the significance of their work from the book, which comprises the artistic legacy of 11 artists. Tom Thomson, who died 3 years before the group was formally named, the original 7, Lauren Harris, J.H. MacDonald, A.Y. Jackson, Arthur Lismer, F.H. Varley, Franklin Carmichael, Francis Hans Johnston, and 3 later additions, A.J. Casson, Edwin Holgate, and Lemoyne Fitzgerald. These men broke with tradition and established a new way of painting Canada. 400 of their works are presented in this book, representing the diverse Canadian landscape in all its glory. These are the images that helped Canada to discover its identity 100 years ago and that described the country as it was then and as much of it is today. Formed one evening in March 1920, 6 of the original 7 artists were present. Jackson was away painting in Georgian Bay. Missing also was Tom Thomson, who had been the inspiration of all the artists gathered before his untimely passing when only in his 30s. He was, Harris wrote, as vital to the movement, as much a part of its formation and development as any other member. Thomson stands even now as the Canadian painter, harsh, brittle, uncouth, not only most Canadian, but most creative. The members of the Group of Seven were already well-respected figures in the Canadian world of art in 1920. While they were not rich except for Harris, neither were they poor nor lacking in materials, studios, or enough income on which to survive. Had it not been for World War I, the group would likely have been formed earlier. The group's intent was that the artistic salvation of Canada was art that was Canadian in its entirety, rather than expressing European subjects and style. In true Canadian fashion, they went about this in a socially responsible, serious, fervent, egalitarian way, believing that Canada should form a distinct approach to art, art education, and design, and proposing progress, advancement, and development rather than revolt or revolution. The group painted, exhibited, wrote, and published. They illustrated, lectured, and talked, persuading curators and critics alike, and inspiring the younger generation. As the book says, 2 aspects of the group contributed to their success then, and the same factors continue to keep their reputations alive now. Their identification of the North as a touchstone for Canadian sensibilities, and the conviction that their appeal to the ordinary thinking Canadian would be acceptable and accepted. The North is widely represented in their work, from remote Algoma at the east of Lake Superior to the East Coast, including Newfoundland and Labrador, to the Canadian West, with vast plains and rugged mountains, and the far north, the Arctic. The whole country was included in their vision of a northern nation, embracing the geography from coast to coast, defining Canada as different to anywhere else. Harris explained, "No man can roam or inhabit the Canadian North without it affecting him. And the artist, because of his constant habit of awareness and his discipline and expression, is perhaps more aware of its moods and spirit than others are. He is thus better equipped to interpret it to others and then, when he has become one with its spirit, to create living works in their own right by using forms, colors, rhythms, and moods to make a harmonious home for the imaginative and spiritual meaning it has evoked in him." It was the power and clarity and rugged elemental beauty of their own land that they turned to for inspiration, guidance, and subject matter. The group's overarching aims were lofty, but they were formed for the purpose of exhibiting landscapes of Canada in a cohesive and considered fashion. They exhibited 8 times at the Art Museum of Toronto between May 1920 and December 1931, consistently inviting other artists to contribute to their shows. It was during this period that members left and were added prior to the disbanding of the group in 1933. The last living member, Casson, died in 1992. The productivity of the group was staggering, whatever you might think of the aesthetic mix of their work. Depicting and redefining the people and geography of Canada, they provided the historic anchor that tied the country to its art, regions, and sense of northernness, to its soul. Their paintings embedded themselves into the country's self-image at the time, and their masterworks became the way people who had never visited Canada imagined it to be. For myself, I have only been to Ontario and found it to be as beautiful as the paintings depict. It would be wonderful to go further north to Algonquin and beyond to see in person what is amply represented here in this book. The legacy of the Group of Seven and Tom Thomson features a variety of subjects, ideas, styles, moods, conditions, attitudes, scales, sizes and colors wide enough and varied enough to stock any country's image bank. It's a combination of all these images that I look at in this book, and I'm inspired to go beyond my small world, venturing in my imagination into the Canadian North. The images in the book, as you've seen thus far, are simply laid out in sections according to subject. Text is interposed where the subject of the pictures changes in a simple explanatory format, just enough to inform your perusal rather than flooding you with information. I've inserted here a photograph of A.J. Casson's White Pine, painted in 1957, which I saw at the McMichael collection. The scale of the paintings is hard to imagine from the cropped images in the book, and the detail of the strokes caught my imagination. It's the second half of the book that I find most inspirational, the section of paintings representing the east coast to the St. Lawrence River and Quebec, followed by Algonquin Park and Georgian Bay, Algoma and Lake Superior, the prairies, Rockies and West Coast, and the Canadian Arctic. The color palettes vary depending on the season and time of day the artist was capturing, and the styles differ vastly from painter to painter as well. Yet the thread that runs through it all is a love of the land, a sense of belonging and oneness with nature. That's what comes through most of all. They're simple compositions for the most part, form and shape sometimes taking priority. As I mentioned before, I often can't tell the scale of the original painting from a book like this, but one would imagine they couldn't be too large when painted outdoors while camping, unless they were done later in the studio from studies captured in the wilds. Because there are 11 painters whose work is shown, there's a great deal of variety. The same region shown in multiple styles and color palettes, different perspectives from each man's mind. A book like this is useful to own, especially for the sake of that variety. It gives one a glimpse into possibilities of how the same general subjects can be changed in terms of color, form, style, and even painterly brushstrokes. Each member of the group has a technique distinct from the other. All the work shown here is also listed at the back of the book in case you'd like to know materials, sizes, and current location in terms of collections or museums. I often use books like this one to inform my own art practice. Not being a landscape painter is no bar to this. You can learn from every aspect of the paintings in the book. Inspiration is everywhere. Use the color palettes of the paintings to influence your work. Choose a painting and create a master copy to see how you can replicate it. Observe the strokes and mark making and experiment with it. I have done all these and more. Yes, there are paintings that don't interest me, or that are stylistically not my cup of tea, or even that I find offensive to my aesthetic sense, but I can still learn from my dislike and question why it is that they are unappealing. In learning what I don't like, it's easier to understand what I do and why. The other thing to exercise your brain is to try and imagine why the artist chose these aspects to paint. Put yourself in their place. Imagine what it was like to hike the trails of the backwoods in the early 1900s without the modern conveniences to be had today. Were they closer to nature than we are today because of that lack? Would it benefit us to be thus closer or not? If you were in their place, what would you have done differently? Composition changes, color choices, all these can inform your own art practice, and don't just look. Use your sketchbooks to take ideas further. You never know when inspiration strikes. I also use books like this for self-care and to improve my mental health on down days. Looking at beautiful things makes me happy, and nature uplifts me. On occasions when I am bedbound thanks to chronic illness, looking through this kind of book brings me peace and uplifts my spirits. Reading the extraordinary details of these artists' vision for their group and their mission to bring the nation's natural beauty to the attention of the world brings me joy and creates a natural excitement to continue my own art and create beauty for other people to experience. Usually there's a pile of such books on my bedside table to go through before I sleep, so my dreams will be filled with art and beauty and sweetness rather than stress and technology and nightmares. It makes for a better rest too. Books like this are invaluable. They teach us so much, this one providing information about a group of men who had a vision and left behind such an outstanding legacy, about whom I was unlikely to have learned more after my brief introduction to their work nearly 2 decades ago. Books that collect artwork in this fashion are the best way of building your own art library, and when you have them at hand, the call of the World Wide Web is less likely to distract you, letting yourself immerse your brain in the subject in front of you. Scrolling through images on the internet just doesn't have that same appeal, even though it's a valid tool for extending your research. But physical libraries full of yet more books are also there for that very purpose. I've provided links down below in the description to buy this book via my bookshop.org affiliate wishlist, so please do support independent bookshops online or locally rather than going via big box retail retailers if you're purchasing it, and I may also earn a small commission from your purchase which costs you nothing extra. If you like this book review, check out the other ones on my channel, which I will also link for you here and below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!